Hey, John, thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Hi, Steve. Pleasure to be here today.
So great to working, as I mentioned before we started recording, working to get more New Mexico people, New Mexico companies on the podcast. So I'm happy to talk with you since you're here in New Mexico also. Um, Tell us a little bit. I gave the listeners a brief intro, kind of about you and kind of what we're talking about. What, how did you get started in the work that you're doing today with Dash2 Labs?
Um, I think the way I got started was across my career. I started as an applied physicist, and then I went into the Navy as a pilot. Then also became a systems engineer while I was active duty, program management, operations, and so on and so forth. Bridged out of there in the private sector, unmanned aerial systems, nuclear weapon modernization production, and so on. But the recurring challenge was always information and data unavailability and human overload, cognitive overload. And it wasn't just about analyzing the data, it was about finding the information and data, making sure it was current, extracting actionable insights. These are the pain points that resulted in slow decisions, bottlenecks, high cognitive burden. That's what really pushed me into building solutions that helped teams move faster under pressure. And that was fundamentally the reason I started Dash2 Labs. I just kept seeing it over and over in different industries. And that's the problem that we're solving now.
Okay. So did that come up during your military work? I mean,
Um,
did they have some leadership issues? And is that kind of trigger something? It's like, hey, I can help fix this.
yes. I mean, to answer your question, I think, as I had mentioned, it came up in every operation environment I was in, from the cockpit to running what's referred to as the Combat Direction Center on the aircraft carrier, which is a fancy way of saying it's like playing three chess games simultaneously, and each chess game is influencing each other. You're having to manage an air picture, a surface picture, a subsurface picture, all the assets, the weapons, and so on and so forth in protection of the aircraft carrier. All the way to ship modernization and maintenance, DDGs, CVNs. Another way to say that is a destroyers, aircraft carrier modernization and maintenance, communication systems, weapon systems, and so on. In other words, complex environments, lots
Yeah.
of moving pieces, project management, operations, and so on and so forth. Same. Sorry to get back to the your question to answer it explicitly for the military. Yes, I did see the same problem I see in the private sector in the military, where there's disaggregated information and data. People need to keep moving forward quickly, and they end up getting stuck in the weeds where they're trying to find the most current information. And then once it's found, trying to synthesize that into actionable insights can take upwards of 3 weeks at times, sometimes longer than that. In this case, I thought, look, there's got to be a better way. As a leader, I need to be thinking strategically and not being stuck in the weeds all the time. And that was the impetus, at least from the military perspective, that really drove starting or at least creating Dash2 Labs. I think it was about 3 years after I left the military.
Okay. When we talked before the recording, you kind of told me the story behind the name Dash2 Labs, but share that with the audience.
Yeah, so Dash2 Labs, the reason I called it that, I mean, it was a no-brainer for me. Every time I spoke to folks in the military, even outside the military, in the private and even public sector, about the problems that I was seeing and the solutions that I wanted to bring to industry to help solve these. I think it's the whole culture of AI is scary. AI, not that I took AI and said, okay, let's go find a problem. It was more of this is the problem, and AI seemed to be the most viable and efficient solution to solve this problem. Now, getting back to Dash Two, what it is in military aviation, it's your wingman. So
Mhm.
what we're trying to do is not necessarily replace the human or the operator or the workforce, rather provide that digital wingman. That way, when you need it most, you have it. It's there by your side all the time to keep you thinking strategically in your operation or enterprise instead of being stuck in the weeds. You have that readily available, and it's similar to your wingman in the military aviation.
Mhm. Okay. So the products or the tools that the Dash2 Labs is creating and offering, do you kind of work as like a consulting role? Do you get the information and then or analyze a company and how they're working and maybe where they're having problems and then you run your AI to optimize it, or do they actually run the tools and it is a partner there or a resource helping helping with their daily activities?
Right now, it's two.
Okay.
Dash2 Labs specifically has two primary revenue sources. One is enterprise deployments. Enterprise deployments will be releasing some more information on this project, but we're very excited to be working with Sunport, which I think it was the Washington Post designated it the seventh most, I think, the best airport in the U.S. for a multitude of reasons. And we're just very happy to be part of that, applying and developing our technology for the Sunport. Um, that's one of our revenue sources, and that does require some consulting service where we need to ensure that we distill their needs and technical requirements to ensure that we can build out a solution predicated on our core technology that addresses their needs. Now, our core technology is very domain adaptive. It can be retrofitted into different enterprises very quickly. Example, a very complex project we can get done in about 6 weeks for large enterprises. The second revenue stream that I'd mentioned is more of, you hit the go button and it goes. And that's the product that we're building right now that we're very excited about is we're building a digital wingman, so to speak, for additive manufacturing. What we found working with our partner, New Collar AI, Sarah Boisvert specifically, she's an expert in additive manufacturing for 30 years. She's been doing manufacturing for 30 and teaching additive manufacturing for just over 10 years. What we're trying to do with Sarah is effectively democratize that very niche subject matter expertise associated with 3D printing or additive manufacturing as a whole, polymers, metal printing for aerospace, and so on. Mostly because it is a very niche area in which
Mhm.
subject matter expertise is required. Having a manual of operating a printer is insufficient. There's a lot of other factors where only a subject matter expert is going to know. What about humidity, oxygen levels, angle of print, and so on and so forth? So what we're doing is we're effectively digitizing the mind of a subject matter expert and coupling that with best practices, lessons learned, and of course, all the operational manuals associated with these 3D printers, and providing that across an entire workforce, addressing a very big pain point. Currently, right now, as all of us know, we're looking at manufacturing reshoring. We're being asked to do more with less, and I think all of us have experienced this. This is
Yeah.
specifically in manufacturing now. When you look at the manufacturing base, over 92% of the manufacturing base here in the US are the small mom and pop shops, shops less than 250 people, supplying the big Boeings, Lockheeds, and so on with all their components, which are then integrated on their assembly floors. Now, again, these people are being asked to do more with less. They're turning to additive manufacturing to do that, to gain efficiencies and so on. The problem with it is they're ill-equipped, at least on average, to effectively and efficiently operate these machines. So what we're doing at Dash2 Labs is we are taking that subject matter expertise and providing them a subject matter expert in additive manufacturing in their pocket when they need it most. It gets back to our core mission of ensuring that you can keep moving forward as quickly as possible and knowing that you're making decisions that are predicated on the most real-time information and data.
Okay. So I, I know with AI, I'm not an expert, but there's a training process or the learning process. So then, do you have a system or an approach for kind of building up that information, kind of getting the subject matter experts' knowledge and things kind of into the AI system so that it can make smart recommendations or informed?
Right. And that's the tough part. The easy part is we have a custom generative AI scraper. It's very powerful. I can't provide the metrics on the call, but
Okay.
it's very fast. And what it does is it helps us build a very curated corpus of information and data very, very quickly, in less than a day. A lot. Well, okay, I'll leave it there. As far as is as I said, digitizing the mind of that subject matter expert, there's lots of ways to do that. In this case, it is going to be which it's highly predicated on past teachings, lessons learned, and things of that nature. So
Yeah.
that does require some training within our system. But again, this is a product that once it's built, you hit the go button and you can just download a license or subscribe to it, and you have the subject matter expert in your pocket on
Nice.
day one. Something else that it's going to provide is once it's integrated within your operation, and it is a very secure system, DoD grade databases and containers and so on and so forth. That way, I know a lot of folks are very proprietary about their information. It starts to, once you start to aggregate it inside of your ecosystem, standard operating procedures, operations, your own metrics, it effectively starts to learn your own organization of how you guys operate, what your inefficiencies are. If you have a solid risk management database, then we can look at even more really exciting advanced functionality where you could start to distill tribal knowledge, so to speak, or institutional knowledge on variances between existing problems, risks, how they were solved, what was the capital expense, the time spent, who solved it, and so on and so forth, balanced against what standard operating procedure says in those explicit firms. So we're able to digitally distill that institutional knowledge as well once it's deployed.
Mm-hmm. How have these tools that you're using with customers, how have they helped your own business?
In what way? Can you?
Do you use them to analyze your own processes and your own business operations, and have they provided some insights to you?
I think it's real important to. I mean, we're a small firm. Every client that we work with is always, we have standardized processes, deployments, and so on,
Mhm.
but we're always learning, and it's just something that I've instilled in my team is never be complacent in what we know now. And I think we're going to get into this in just a minute in risk management and so
Yeah.
on, and identifying what's coming up next, but always learning. You do bring up a point that I do want to bring up as well, as far as the technology is concerned. If the if our client elects to analyze any kind of query, or as people, or let's say a workforce interacts with our platform, they're gaining value, instant value, and access to subject matter expertise. The super smart 22-year kid out of college, very, very book smart, but lacks the problem solving capability of that 30-year, 40-year veteran. Now it's that information is democratized and so on and so forth. But as people start to interact with our platform, what we can do is we can effectively analyze the queries that are coming in, and then stratify those. So that way, instead of a survey, if you want to understand how your enterprise is doing, what people are asking, what questions they're asking, in this case, you can find out exactly, hey, look, there's a lot of questions being asked about holiday leave. Okay, now it's more data centric, a data vector on what information you should be putting out to your enterprise. If there's questions being asked about one specific problem within an operation, then we can actually analyze that and find the trend and say, look, here's what's happening here. This needs to be addressed, or and so on and so forth. So it's a two-sided platform, and there's value created on both sides of that.
Okay, great. So, one of the things we wanted to talk about today was risk management and kind of how you've got a phrase that you used. You told me about from the military that stuck in my head. I'll let you share that. But what what are your thoughts on risk management, and what kind of activities are you doing in that area to help companies?
I think risk management, well, let's just say risk in general. It's intrinsic in everything that we do as human
Sure.
beings, right? Driving a car, riding in an airplane, going to the grocery store, it doesn't really matter. In this case, we're looking at building technology, right, to help address some real pain points. Now, in this case, as far as risk is concerned, something I really bake into my team's culture is, like you had mentioned, something I took from military aviation, and we are always assessing risk as aviators before we enter the cockpit when we're mission planning. While we're walking out to the aircraft and we hop in the cockpit and fly the mission and so on, we're always thinking ahead of the aircraft. And what that means is, what in the military, what is going to kill you next, so to speak. In this case, in a cockpit, you may actually be killed, right? Because you may be flying into a mountain or something similar to that. But in this case, in the business context, you may be um, marching towards a black swan event, or schedule creep, scope creep, blowing your budget, and so on and so forth. So identifying these types of risks within an organization and even during project execution is just critical. And I think it's very important to think systematically about these, categorize these risks, identify them, find ways of mitigation before they become actual issues, which in the Project Management Institute verbiage is a realized risk. You saw the risk, it actually occurred. Now it's an issue. Now you need to develop a plan of action and milestone to get yourself out of it. So
Okay. So is AI helping with that too?
I think AI helps substantially with that.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is I'll give you an example. If you have a workforce that's doing manufacturing on very potent technology, something that can explode, jet fuel, whatever the case is, instead of making assumptions and saying, look, I've been doing this for 25 years. I know exactly what's going on, or for 10 years. What we found is it's easy to become complacent, right? Which can result in some pretty bad things. In this case, instead of having to say, look, I need this information or this procedure, I have it in my head. I'm just going to proceed without referencing it, mostly because it's so difficult to find. You now have that instantly at your fingertips. And if there's any kind of nuances, you can actually interact with our platform since it is subject matter expert based to interact with it and find out what the most viable solution would be, or at least a proposed solution of
Mhm.
the problem that you're facing right now. So as far as risk mitigation, it does mitigate risk in that one example, you don't have to assume anymore. You have that expert knowledge, that database, those procedures, those processes, those metrics of operating a machine at your fingertips instantly, and you know it's accurate and on the spot in real time.
Hmm. Interesting. What's just for the audience who's not necessarily using your tools, what's the best way for them to if risk management is something that they need to address, what's a good way to get started? What should somebody do first to start mitigating their risks?
I think one of the big things is first, I mean, the way I would advise it is categorize it first. So it depends
Okay.
on what they're doing. If it's a project, I'd wager to say that most things can be been in a general category. So if you're looking at a project, you'll get schedule, scope, budget as one. But then you have to look at all the factors that influence a project, the human factors, any kind of external supplier, your existing supply, expiration dates, and so on. So just look at the general categories at first. Once you identify the general categories, and again, this is a very systematic exercise that I think any team should go through. You start to ask yourselves, okay, we're executing this project. These are the categories. What can go wrong within these categories? So you're not going to capture every single risk, but you are systematically thinking through what can potentially happen. It's very similar to executing a military operation, right? Um, we can't possibly foresee every single thing that's going to happen
No.
during a mission, but we have substantial training that goes into it before we execute any mission, substantial planning that goes into it before executing any mission. And what that does, especially if we're working with allies or coalition partners or so on, it maintains that level of predictability in the fog of war, so to speak. You enter that gray space, it's hard to predict what's happening because now your rubber meets the road. You're interacting with a system that is unpredictable, but you and your team are predictable to each other. And I think that's critical not only in military operations, but also in building technology or executing a project with a client. You can always fall back on that framework and be predictable. And I think it's very important, specifically now that we're all working in a hybrid environment. Some of my team
Sure.
works in Montana, in Washington State, in California, some folks here. So that level of predictability is critical, and I think that's important.
Okay. Right. That's good. Good advice. So you also have experience with market assessments. Tell us a little bit about that experience and then how you approach a market assessment for a client or for yourself.
Yeah, just a high level. The reason we do market assessments for clients is Dash2 Labs is fully bootstrapped at this point. We have not taken any investment at all, and the way we've been doing that is through some consulting services. The vast majority, we've helped about over 25 companies in the state of New Mexico over the past year, and the vast majority of our demand comes from market assessments. Now, what that means is we're seeing this demand largely because there's a lot of technical founders here in the state, very, very savvy, very sophisticated scientists and engineers that want to build a solution and then take it to market and build it and they will come mentality, and that it just will not work that way. I really wish it did because I'm fundamentally an engineer as well. But what we do is we help these folks take that gigantic bale of hay, their broad market of I'm attacking this market, and say, okay, let's run some basic. Again, it's all systematic. Let's find the most viable area within that bale of hay in which these folks should be focusing their spotlight on. And what that means is it's basically it's de-risking, so to speak. So we talked about risk. In this case, we're de-risking that technology by saying, look, instead of building out a full product, you have an idea, let's build a min viable product. Let's do a market assessment and identify the most viable segments. And the reason for that is a lot of the firms we work with are expending time and capital in the proverbial valley of death. There's lots of shiny lights on the horizon. Which one do I go for? Unfortunately, some will go for light and think that that's the right market to attack, if there's even a market there, and they'll expend their time and resources and end up dying in the valley of death. Yeah, just to finish that up, we basically help de-risk high tech companies in identifying the most viable market segment through characteristics, multi-layered segmentation, and then balancing that multi-layered segmentation with compounded annual growth rates, market size, form, function, geographic location of viable product, and then of course demographics, and balance that with their technology, because we can understand their tech from an engineering perspective and a business perspective, and
Okay.
provide the advising on where they should be focusing their efforts on. So,
Okay. So I know your kind of examples, and people often talk about if it's a new business, and where do you position, or where do you launch first, or as far as a product or service? Does it work also for updates? So as your, so for example, for Dash2 Labs, as you grow and either add new services and things, and you have multiple options, do you take the same approach on how to expand your product line, or even just down to the level of new features?
right. That's a really great question. I'd say that an initial market assessment is just tip of the iceberg. That really drives like at least a general direction of where you should be focusing your
Hmm.
company, which then you flesh out a full business plan from there. So it is very much tip of the iceberg. These consulting services we provide are generally about 2 to 3 weeks at most at this point. But to get to your question, it's very similar. And
Okay.
look, everything that's built should be customer centric. I mean, customer centric, customer focused. What are the pain points they're experiencing? And
Hmm.
ideally, you start to like identify, we start working with multiple clients and you start to understand the trend. Very similar pain points that are occurring. That way, technology can be built out for scale and not necessarily just addressing one specific niche pain point. And I think that's a very critical piece of that. So to answer your question, yes, it is a very evolving process. We never stop. We never become complacent, and we're always cognizant of the pain points that we're solving for our clients.
Okay. How do you leverage AI kind of in making those decisions, whether it's the first product or market to go after, or if it's for your incremental changes?
Um, we It's a question that's asked us a lot because right now you have like ChatGPT, OpenAI, you have a few other products that have some reasonable market assessment capability where you can
Hmm.
just type it in, interact with it. And I think that's a good starting point. I really do think it's a good starting point. But I also think that you have to have some kind of systematic methodology in order to really extract value from interacting with a large language model like ChatGPT as an example. It's not going to give you the everything that you need up front to develop that strategy that you need for your business. As far as how we interact with AI and how we use AI for these market assessments, we'll it's very cursory at most, mostly because we pride ourselves on very curated, hand-stitched market assessments to help founders. I think one of the value propositions that we provide through that service is we have been in the shoes of the folks that we're helping, and we're not academic. It's just critical. When I first started my company, I thought I had all the tools in my in my belt that I needed to start a business because I went to MIT Sloan and I learned all the great things, and it provided a really great frameworks. But in my opinion, to really understand and know how it is to advise an entrepreneur, you have to have walked in those shoes because there's a lot of pains that you have to go through, the scars that you have to incur in order so you can effectively advise companies not just on an academic level on market assessments, but helping these people get to revenue as fast as they can, validate their product, validate product market fit, and then looking at scaling long term instead of just providing a market assessment, saying here's the broad U.S. market, here's the compounding annual growth rate, and here's what I suggest. Let's get down to the nitty gritty as well and help these folks on the granular level. That way they have the best chance of surviving.
Right. Okay. That's good. It's good advice. Um, you've already shared some good tips, but if you give one tip, maybe your most valuable tip to a tech leader, something they could implement, let's say this week, that actually make a positive impact on their business. What's the one tip you would share?
Um, yeah, I thought about this question, and I think it really boils down to just one thing: communication is critical, and is very fundamental in anything, right? I'll use two examples. One is internally with your team, your developers or your tech team or your business folks. I think it's critical to ensure that everyone is on the same page and understands why you're doing what you're doing and what the end objective is. Not only the mission of the company, but the project that you're executing on now. The reason being is, as humans, we like to make assumptions and say, look, we're good with this. We're going to keep moving forward. I think as a leader, communicating and ensuring that all your folks are on the same page at the same time is a critical thing. And there's different mechanisms to do that. You can do a weekly sync, bi-weekly sync, and it could be 15 minutes. In fact, I would say that it should not be any more than 15 minutes. If there's any kind of issues that pop, okay, let's work those offline. But it keeps everyone on the same page. Same thing with clients. Ensuring that you're communicating with clients is critical. Not making assumptions, making sure you're on glide paths, so to speak. And if you're not, make that course correction before it gets worse. The last thing you want to do is provide a product, it's built, and they say, look, I really wanted a purple cup, not not a green cup that's square, and so on. So I think that's a critical piece of that. So
Yeah,
communications, I think, is paramount.
I had a mentor early in my career and who similar. He's asked a lot of questions of the client to be sure you're doing the right things because his favorite phrase was the worst thing you can do is 100 miles an hour in the wrong direction. So, I mean, I've heard that from
Yes,
other people too, but yeah, it is. If you don't have a roadmap or if you got the wrong map, you're you're not doing what's best for everybody.
exactly.
So, what's your biggest challenge right now that you and maybe at Dash Labs or that you're working through?
I think well, let's face it. I mean, small companies, startups are facing 100 challenges every day, right?
Yep.
Um, I think one of the biggest challenges on a broad level that we face almost every day is we are developing cutting edge AI solutions for what could be seen as legacy industries. Could be manufacturing, project management, airport operations are all well established. They have standardized processes, procedures, but it doesn't change the fact that people are still scared of AI. I'm not going to say scared, but let's just say they're cautious about AI, and they should be. Is this thing going to take my job? Where does my information and data go? What can I put in here? And I think one of the biggest challenges that is that cultural adoption. And with some of these legacy industries, it does require that diligence when you're building out your business plan and so on. And in this case, people they want to see it, they want to touch it, they want to interact with it firsthand and not virtually. So that really just drives go-to-market strategy and so on. But it is one of the challenges that we face, and the way we mitigate that is it's largely educational and say, look, high level, here's some examples, some case studies. We'd be very transparent on the way we work, implementation, development, the whole thing, and just go hand in hand with our clients. So yeah,
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Yeah, there's one of the other guests that will be coming up on the podcast is talking about AI and all these claims that it can make. And it can't do it can't really do some of the reasoning in
mm-hmm.
his opinion that some people claim it can.
Yeah,
So that would take the edge off a little bit, but just also, yeah, the being careful. And you know this, you mentioned this earlier about um, what you're training AI with, and if that's going to be publicly available, you don't want to
yeah,
load your inventions into AI and have it give you advice and you just publish them to the world. So,
right. And
okay,
yeah, I do want to just hit on a couple of more bullets there real quick.
sure.
Um, when folks, an argument that I always hear is, look, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? And I agree with that
Mhm.
with AI systems. But I would also argue that isn't it the same thing with a human being with a new employee? A new employee is onboarded onto an enterprise. You provide him or her outdated standard operating procedures and policies. They're going to act in accordance with that, and it's going to result in that variance. Again, it's that garbage in, garbage out. So I think it is critical to ensure that you have very curated data sets, databases. It is secure. If it's a client that says, "Look, I don't want my stuff out on the broader ether," can you truncate the large language model in this case? That's something we actually can do. where it never ever will interface outside of an IT infrastructure. It's contained, so to speak. So I think that's a very critical piece there. As far
Right.
as other items with AI, hallucinations always comes up. I don't think personally that hallucinations can ever be eliminated, at least right now, but they can be minimized. And the way to do that is very small curated data sets in which this large language model is interfacing with. And also, I had mentioned chain of thought algorithms, and I think that's critical, where you work with a subject matter expert and you can embed custom analytics where you can direct the search within that very complex database, curated database, to extract the information that's needed and then synthesize that through your custom analytics to emulate
Right.
the mind of that subject matter expert. That, again, minimizes hallucinations. I don't think it'll eliminate it, but it's something that we're very transparent with our clients.
Okay. It is a good point, though, with a lot of these different topics that people are complaining about the AI doing it. It's like, well, humans have been doing that for decades because our brains aren't perfect either. And yeah, if you don't give somebody the best information or the most accurate information, then they're not going to give you the results that you want.
Right.
So interesting. So I know you've got a lot of things going on, but what's ahead for you and your team for as we finish up this year and get into next year?
Yeah. So as I had mentioned, we're working with the Albuquerque International Sunport on a very exciting project, and I think there'll be some subsequent exciting projects with our team.
Okay.
We'll be releasing information on that. We're working with our marketing team now. I'd say in the next, I'd say by mid-October or less than that, we should be releasing some information on those projects. We're very excited about this digital additive manufacturing expert. There's lots of applications there, including my home port, so to speak, with military applications. As anyone listening in the military knows, we get 3 weeks of training on some, X system, and you're now the expert. And now you're going out to sea for 9 months, and good luck figuring that out. Or you're at a forward operating base where supply chain is just bottlenecked, and you just can't get components out there. In this case, the reason I think it's just so critical is we're going to provide that capability at the service members' fingertips, and it's all about combat readiness to make sure these folks have what they need when they need it as efficiently as possible. And what this does is it does provide that. It will get them what they need, and they won't have to go through the trials and tribulations of this additive manufacturing, 3D printing, the nuances, and then learn those and figure that out. They'll have what they need. They can print what they need on the spot, and it's the best component they can get. So that's what we're excited about, at least in the next several months.
Okay. That sounds exciting and extremely valuable. So I wish you luck that it all rolls out perfectly. So
Yep.
so I'm sure that some of the listeners may have questions for you or just want to learn more about you and Dash2 Labs. What's the best way for somebody to reach out, either with a question or just if they want to connect?
They can reach me at my email. It's jchrndz at dash2 labs, DASH number 2 labs.com, or
Okay.
we have our website dash2labs.com. And then of course, I can always provide you the links as well if you're going to put that is any type of the advertisement or so on. I'd be happy to do that.
Yep. I'll put the links in the show notes and any posts so that if any listeners are like me and have a hard time remembering URLs just audibly,
Right.
we'll have that in there. So it'll be easy for people to reach out and connect with you. So this has been very informative, and I love learning about new things and love to hear what you're doing with AI and some of your specific applications for your clients. And that's fun. And thanks for sharing your tips and your experience. You have a very unique background, and I know that's valuable to the listeners.
Great. Yeah, I appreciate the time, Steve, and to all your listeners, I appreciate any feedback, or I'd love to connect on LinkedIn and
Okay.
go from there.
All right. Now I'll get your LinkedIn link in the show notes as well, so people can find you easily. So, okay. Well, thanks again for your time, John. I'll let you get back to your many projects.
Great. Thank you, Steve.
Mhm.